My Brother Martin by Christine King Ferris. As we read, we will try to find clues to help us determine the author's purpose for writing this story. We already know that Martin's sister is telling this story, and she is starting right from the time that he is born. We were born in the same room, my brother Martin and I. I was an early baby, born sooner than expected. Mother dear and Daddy placed me in the chifforobe drawer that stood in the corner of their upstairs bedroom. I got a crib a few days afterwards. A year and a half later, Martin spent his first night in that hand-me-down crib in the very same room. The house where we were born belonged to Mother dear's parents, our grandparents, the Reverend and Miss A. D. Williams. We lived there with them and our Aunt Ida, our grandmother's sister. And not long after my brother Martin, who we called M.L. because he and Daddy had the same name, our baby brother was born. His name was Alfred Daniel, but we called him A.D. after our grandfather. Can you tell so far if the three King siblings get along? What strategies can you use to get this information? They called me Christine, and like 3 peas in one pod, we grew together. Our days and rooms were filled with adventure stories and tinker toys, with dolls and Monopoly and Chinese checkers. And although Daddy, who was an important minister, and Mother dear, who was known far and wide as a musician, often had work that took them away from home, our dear grandmother was always there to take care of us. I remember sitting at her feet, and she and Aunt Ida filled us with grand memories of their childhood, and read to us about all the wonderful places in the world. And of course, my brothers and I had each other. We 3 stuck together like pages in a brand new book, and being normal young children, we were almost always up to something. Our best prank involved a piece of fur that belonged to our grandmother. It looked almost alive, with its tiny feet and little head and gleaming glass eyes. So every once in a while, in the waning light of evening, we'd tie that fur piece to a stick, and hiding behind the hedge in front of our house, we would dangle it in front of unsuspecting passers-by. Boy, you could hear the screams of fright all across the neighborhood. Then there was the time Mother dear decided that her children should all learn to play piano. I didn't mind too much, but M.L. and A.D. preferred being outside to being stuck inside with our piano teacher, Mr. Mann, who would rap your knuckles with a ruler just for playing the wrong notes. Well, one morning, M.L. and A.D. decided to loosen the legs on the piano bench so we wouldn't have to practice. We didn't tell Mr. Mann, and when he sat, crash, down he went. Turn and talk to your neighbor. The author says, and being normal young children, we were almost always up to something. What is the author's purpose in presenting her childhood this way? But mostly we were good, obedient children, and M.L. did learn to play a few songs on the piano. He even went off to sing with our mother a time or two. Given his love for singing and music, I'm sure he could have become as good a musician as our mother had his life not called him down a different path. But that's just what his life did. Think about the author's purpose here. What events does the author include? Why does the author tell so much about Martin's childhood? My brothers and I grew up a long time ago, back in a time when certain places in our country had unfair laws that said it was right to keep black people separate because our skin was darker, and our ancestors had been captured in far-off Africa and brought to America as slaves. Atlanta, Georgia, the city in which we were growing up, had those laws. Because of those laws, my family rarely went to the picture shows or visited Grand Park with its famous cyclorama. In fact, to this very day, I don't ever recall seeing my father on a streetcar. Because of those laws and the indignity that went with them, Daddy preferred keeping M.L., A.D., and me close to home, where we'd be protected. We lived in a neighborhood in Atlanta that's now called Sweet Auburn. It was named for Auburn Avenue, the street that ran in front of our house. On our side of the street stood 2-story famous houses similar to the one we lived in. Across it crouched a line of 1-story row houses. in a store owned by a white family. When we were young, all the children along Auburn Avenue played together, even the two boys whose parents owned the store. In a biography, the author normally gives information about the time period and places in which the subject lived. How did the laws in Atlanta at the time affect M.L.'s family? Why does the author include this information? And since our house was our favorite gathering place, those boys played with us in our backyard and ran with M.L. and A.D. to the firehouse on the corner where they watched the fire engines and the firemen. The thought of not playing with those kids because they were different, because we were white and they were black, never entered our mind. Turn and talk to your neighbor. Why does the author emphasize the word not? Look for clues to support your answer. Well, one day M.L. and A.D. went to get their playmates from across the street just as they had done 100 times before. But they came home alone. The boys had told my brothers that they could not play together anymore because A.D. and M.L. were Negroes, and that was it. Shortly afterward, the family sold the store and moved away. We never saw or heard from them again. The author has been using her memories to tell us about the happy, normal childhood that M.L. and his siblings had. Why did the author include the sad story about losing their friends? Read ahead to page 149 to learn more about what this experience meant to M.L. Read through this page, and then we will talk about it. Turn and talk to your neighbor. How would you sequence the events that have happened to M.L. during his childhood as the author describes it so far? After you come to a decision with your partner, write this on a sticky note. Her words explain the streetcars our family avoided and the whites-only sign that kept us off the elevator at City Hall. Her words told us why there were parks and museums that black people could not visit, and why some restaurants refused to serve us, and why hotels wouldn't give us rooms, and why theaters would only allow us to watch their picture shows from the balcony. But her words also gave us hope. She answered simply, because they just don't understand that everyone is the same, but someday it will be better. And my brother M.L. looked up into our mother's face and said the words I remember to this day. He said, "Mother dear, one day I'm going to turn this world upside down." In the coming years there would be other reminders of the cruel system called segregation that sought to keep black people down. But it was Daddy who showed M.L. and A.D. and me how to speak out against hatred and bigotry and stand up for what's right. Daddy was the minister at Ebenezer Baptist Church, and after losing our playmates when M.L., A.D., and I heard our father speak from his pulpit, his words held new meaning. And Daddy practiced what he preached. He always stood up for himself when confronted with hatred and bigotry, and each day he shared his encounters at the dinner table. When a shoe salesman told Daddy and M.L. that he'd only serve them in the back of the store because they were black, Daddy took M.L. somewhere else to buy new shoes. What literary device does the author use to describe Martin's reaction when his mother explained the prejudice to the children? Why do you think the author includes this? Another time, a police officer pulled Daddy over and called him boy. Daddy pointed to ML sitting next to him in the car and said, "This is a boy. I am a man, and until you call me one, I will not listen to you." These stories were as nourishing as the food that was set before us. Turn and talk to your neighbor. Can you find a simile on this page? Years would pass, and many new lessons would be learned. There would be numerous speeches and marches and prizes. But my brother never forgot the example of our father, or the promise he had made to our mother on the day his friends turned him away. And when he was much older, my brother ML dreamed a dream that turned the world upside down. Why does the author echo Martin's words, "I'm going to turn this world upside down"?